Good morning. J'ouvre maintenant la séance.
The session is now in order. Welcome to meeting number 48 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts according to Section 108.3 of the regulations. The committee is meeting today to study Report 9, Vaccines Against COVID-19, Reports 9 and 10 of the Auditor General of Canada.
We have a long list, so please bear with me. From the Office of the Auditor General, Karen Hogan, nice to see you. Auditor General of Canada, Susan Gomez, Principal, hello. Nadine Cormier, Director, hello. Actually, I'm going to not say hello to everyone, but I welcome you all here. Public Health Agency of Canada, Luc Gagnon, Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Digital Transformation Officer, Digital Transformation Branch by video conference. Dr. Harpreet Kocher, President. Stephen Bent, Vice President, COVID-19 Vaccine Rollout Task Force. That was from the Public Health Agency of Canada. From the Department of Health, we have Stephen Lucas, Deputy Minister. Celia Lorenko, Acting Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, Health Products and Food Branch. Supriya Sharma, Chief Medical Advisor and Senior Medical Advisor, Health Products and Food Branch. And finally, from the Department of Public Works and Government Services, Ariane Riza, Associate Deputy Minister. Ariane Riza. Associate Deputy Minister. Michael Mills, Assistant Deputy Minister, Procurement Branch. All four departments will have 5 minutes each. I'm going to begin with Ms. Hogan. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie de nous donner le...
Mr. Chair, thank you for this opportunity to discuss our report on COVID-19 vaccines, which was tabled in the House of Commons on December 6, 2022. I'd like to acknowledge that this hearing is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Joining me today, Susan Gomez, the principal who is responsible for the audit, and Nadine Cormier, the director who led the audit team. This audit examined how the federal government procured, authorized, and distributed vaccines to the provinces and territories to immunize Canadians against COVID-19. Overall, we found that the Public Health Agency of Canada, Health Canada, and Public Services and Procurement Canada worked together to respond to the urgent nature of the pandemic and secured enough COVID-19 vaccine doses to vaccinate everyone living in Canada. Health Canada helped get vaccines to Canadians by adjusting its usual authorization process. The department did this by reviewing information from the vaccine companies as it became available, rather than waiting to receive a complete application package before starting its review. We found that Health Canada followed a systematic process to authorize the COVID-19 vaccines. In 2020, Public Services and Procurement Canada established advance purchase agreements with 7 companies that showed the potential to develop viable vaccines. Between December 2020 and May 2022, the federal government paid for 169 million vaccine doses. Over 84 million were administered to eligible people across the country. On average, the Public Health Agency of Canada delivered vaccines within 2 days of receiving a province's or a territory's request. This is successful considering the logistics of transporting temperature-sensitive materials to sometimes remote locations.
Public Health Agency of Canada and Health Canada collaborated and analyzed COVID-19 vaccine surveillance data to monitor the safety, coverage, and effectiveness of the vaccines. However, a lack of finalized data sharing agreements with the provinces and territories meant that the agency struggled to effectively share detailed case-level safety surveillance data with Health Canada, the World Health Organization, and vaccine companies. We raised concerns about the sharing of health data between federal and provincial or territorial health authorities in 1999, in 2002, in 2008, and again in 2021. These long-standing issues, including implementing a pan-Canadian framework for sharing information, must be urgently addressed because the sharing of health data is a cornerstone of effective surveillance to keep Canadians safe. We also found that problems with information sharing affected the Public Health Agency of Canada's ability to gather wastage and expiry information. Delays in implementing important functionalities of Vaccine Connect also reduced the agency's ability to track wastage. By the end of May 2022, Canada had 32.5 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines, estimated to be worth about $1 billion in federal, provincial, and territorial inventories. Another 50.6 million doses were deemed surplus and offered for donation. Between December 2020 and May 31st, 2022, which marked the end of the period covered by our audit, 15.1 million doses were wasted. Public Health Agency of Canada told us that from June to December 2022, another 11 million doses expired before they could be used or donated. Wastage can happen for many reasons, and given the evolving nature of the pandemic, some wastage was to be expected. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We'd be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hogan. Turning now to Dr. Kocher. You have, from the Public Health Agency of Canada, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee.
Could I just ask you to remove your mask while you're speaking, please? Thank you very much. It just helps with translation and all the members hearing clearly. Thank you.
Again, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee to talk about Public Health Agency of Canada's role in access to COVID-19 vaccines. Joining me today is Stephen Ben, Vice President of Vaccine Rollout Task Force, and Luc Gagnon, who is the Chief Digital Transformation Officer for Health Canada and Public Health Agency of Canada. I'd like to start by acknowledging the findings and recommendations from the OAG audit on COVID-19 vaccination. You will recall this period of time covered by the audit, January 1st, 2020 to May 31st, 2022, was a time of unprecedented mobilization to procure, allocate, distribute, and track the administration of COVID-19 vaccines. Now, since May 31st, 2022, another 13 million doses of vaccines have been administered in Canada. Additionally, 13.5 million more doses were donated, and 11.4 million doses, both mRNA and non-mRNA, had their shelf life extended.
Early in the pandemic, the government needed to make decisions on COVID-19 vaccine procurement. This was at the time when global demand was high, and there was uncertainty about which, if any, vaccine candidates would be approved for use. To help the government make the necessary evidence-based decisions in this uncertain environment, the COVID-19 Vaccine Task Force was established in April 2020.
Of this task force, Canada adopted a diversified vaccine strategy and built its vaccine portfolio with 7 suppliers through advanced purchase agreements. Our strategy was successful, and Canada was among the first in the world to secure early supply and administer COVID-19 vaccine doses in December 2020. The Public Health Agency of Canada is proud of its role and the success of the largest vaccination campaign in our country's history, a campaign that was central to COVID-19 response and recovery. We are also pleased that OAG audit on COVID-19 vaccines noted that Public Health Agency of Canada allocated and distributed COVID-19 vaccines to provinces and territories equitably and in a timely manner. The Government of Canada will continue to ensure the a sufficient supply of COVID-19 vaccines for anticipated demands and population protection. This includes recommended booster doses and new bivalent formulations for people in Canada. At the same time, we're taking steps to manage our COVID-19 vaccine surplus. This includes making surplus doses available for donation to other countries to help address global vaccine inequity. However, this has become increasingly difficult due to global oversupply and diminishing demand. L'agence travaille également en
The agency is also working closely with Public Services and Procurement Canada and vaccine manufacturers to adjust contractual commitments and delivery schedules where possible. Furthermore, we continue to work with provinces, territories, and Indigenous and federal partners on demand planning and forecasting to determine supply requirements for COVID-19 vaccination programs.
Safety of COVID-19 vaccines, PACP is committed to continue transparency. This includes improving information sharing among partners, including Health Canada, WHO, and vaccine companies. We understand this information sharing is an important part of our public health and regulatory system, and Canada's vaccine safety surveillance system continues to effectively monitor, detect, and share, as well as act on vaccine safety signals. The agency will continue to lead the consultations with provinces and territories to address information sharing issues identified by the audit. The Public Health Agency of Canada will continue to share data in aggregate form from this system with the World Health Organization on a regular schedule and on an as-needed basis with vaccine manufacturers. And the agency is actively working to fully implement Vaccine Connect, an IT system to manage a nationwide vaccination program. As of November 2022, the system has a newer module for tracking orders and inventory at central level to support supply chain management. And the agency will continue to work closely with provinces and territories to identify data quality gaps and continue engaging with jurisdictional partners to identify service gaps. In conclusion, Public Health Agency of Canada will review lessons learned and collaborate with implicated departments and stakeholders to optimize COVID-19 vaccine supply management and reduce COVID-19 vaccine surpluses. Thank you, and I would be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I appreciate it. We'll first hear for 5 minutes Dr. Lucas from the Department of Health. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank the committee members for the opportunity to appear before you today. Joining me is Health Canada's Chief Medical Advisor, Dr. Supriya Sharma, and the Acting Associate Assistant Deputy Minister of the Health Products and Food Branch, Dr. Celia Lourenco. Health Canada is responsible for regulating health products in Canada, including vaccines. The department evaluates data in support of the safety, quality, and efficacy of health products before authorizing them for sale in Canada. We also monitor the safety of health products while they are on the market and take prompt action should safety concerns emerge. Santé Canada salue les efforts considérables.
Health Canada acknowledges the extensive effort of the Office of the Auditor General in collaboration with relevant partners across government in developing the COVID-19 vaccines report assessing the procurement, authorization, allocation, distribution, and surveillance of COVID-19 vaccines. Health Canada is responsible for sharing information with PHAC with the provinces and territories. This allows us to continually ensure surveillance and look at vaccine safety reports. I will focus on the areas of the audit related to Health Canada's responsibilities, specifically the authorization of COVID-19 vaccines, surveillance, and data sharing.
The COVID-19 pandemic presented a global threat and public health emergency that required the federal government to act quickly regarding vaccine approval, procurement, distribution, and surveillance. One of Health Canada's top priorities in light of the pandemic was to exercise regulatory agility to support access to vaccines while maintaining rigorous evidence standards that were aligned with those of international regulatory partners. Health Canada welcomes the results of the audit which found that Health Canada expedited the regulatory review and authorization of the vaccines used to combat COVID-19 while upholding the rigorous standards required for our approval. The expedited authorization process was developed and implemented for COVID-19 vaccines through an interim order and modified the department's usual process in a few key ways. Tout d'abord, le ministère a mis sur pied des équipes.
First, the department created dedicated teams that focused on the review of COVID-19 vaccines. This process was made possible by backfilling our staff's previous positions to ensure there were not any compromises. Second, Health Canada authorized vaccine manufacturers to submit data on a rolling basis, which allowed us to review data from early in the development of the vaccine, while later stage clinical trials were taking place. The vaccines were only authorized once all the necessary data were submitted, reviewed, and considered acceptable. Third, we applied terms and conditions on each vaccine authorization to manage uncertainties that remained and ensured closer monitoring of vaccine safety as they are administered in Canada and globally. Finally, Health Canada cooperated extensively with our international partners to share information during the review process and reduce duplication. The audit demonstrates that Public Health Agency and Health Canada efficiently provided access to COVID-19 vaccines, with Health Canada's expedited authorization process playing a critical role in ensuring that vaccine doses were made available to Canadians in a timely manner.
That the Public Health Agency and Health Canada shared relevant surveillance data, such as cases of adverse events following immunization, to effectively monitor the safety and effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines. This allowed both organizations to take immediate action in response to vaccine safety signals resulting from reported adverse events and subsequently communicate them to the Canadian public and to the vaccine manufacturers. In doing so, Health Canada was able to act appropriately and in a timely manner to respond to confirmed vaccine safety signals based on reported adverse events. However, the audit also highlighted long-standing issues related to data sharing, which affected the Public Health Agency's ability to share detailed case-level safety surveillance data with Health Canada. For example, the audit recommended that more should be done to facilitate the sharing of surveillance data with Health Canada by allowing the department access to the Canadian Adverse Events Following Immunization Surveillance System, and by expediting the implementation of the Pan-Canadian Health Data Strategy. Health Canada agrees with the audit's findings, and its recommendations validate the department's efforts to advance a more robust and consistent method of sharing health data. Health Canada will continue to collaborate with the Public Health Agency and provinces and territories on the Pan-Canadian Health Data Strategy, and we support ongoing work with provinces and territories to provide greater access to the Canadian Adverse Events Following Immunization Surveillance System. En conclusion, Santé Canada salue les recommandations de...
In closing, Health Canada's priority is the health and safety of Canadians. We will continue to offer access to vaccines in a timely basis in order to achieve equitable, better health outcomes for Canadians. Again, I would like to thank the committee for having invited me, and I will be pleased to answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Finalement, c'est... Please.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. I'm pleased to appear before the committee to discuss the Auditor General's report on securing vaccines during the COVID-19 pandemic. Here with me today is Michael Mills, Assistant Deputy Minister of Procurement. The Government of Canada worked diligently to secure access to safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines. Au nom de l'Agence de la Santé publique du Canada,
on behalf of the Public Health Agency of Canada and based on advice from the COVID-19 Vaccine Task Force, PSPC led negotiations and finalized agreements with vaccine suppliers. This report by the Auditor General focused on whether Public Services and Procurement Canada provided adequate procurement support to secure COVID-19 vaccines. It concluded that the department provided efficient procurement support to PHAC as part of a whole-of-government response to a rapidly evolving coronavirus pandemic. Working with PHAC, Health Canada, and Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada, and guided by the task force, we successfully secured enough COVID-19 vaccine doses to vaccinate everyone living in Canada. At the end of May 2022, the Public Health Agency reported that about 82% of eligible people at that time had received at least 2 doses. This, Mr. Chair, was the largest mass vaccination program in Canadian history, carried out under the most extraordinary of circumstances.
Hyper-competitive global market, Public Services and Procurement Canada was tasked with procuring the vaccines to reduce Canadians' risk of serious illness, hospitalization, and death. At the time, there was great uncertainty about which vaccines would be developed and authorized and when the vaccines would be available for distribution. Canada also had very limited domestic capacity to produce vaccines and relied on international products. In those early days, procuring the required vaccine doses was a round-the-clock effort, undertaken by PSPC immediately after the Vaccine Task Force made its recommendations regarding potential vaccines. As the department worked to secure a sufficient supply of vaccine doses, we were always mindful of the urgency, as well as the need for due diligence. As the Auditor General noted, Public Services and Procurement Canada modified its procurement processes early in the pandemic to allow use of its emergency contracting authority, enabling the department to procure vaccines using a non-competitive approach. En se fondant sur les conseils d'experts, le Canada a...
Based on expert advice, Canada adopted a sweeping strategy to supply everyone in Canada with the most promising COVID-19 vaccines. It was a strategy to cover all bases, secure agreements with several companies in case Health Canada authorized only one or a few vaccines. By January 2021, PSPC had signed 7 advance purchase agreements for up to 414 million potential doses. These agreements included advance payments required to support vaccine development, testing, and at-risk manufacturing. The Auditor General found that the department exercised due diligence on these 7 companies by conducting assessments to examine their financial capability to meet requirements, and by conducting integrity checks to mitigate the risk of unethical business practices. Ultimately, our approach was successful. In July 2021, the government announced that Canada had received more than 66 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines, enough to fully vaccinate every eligible person in Canada, and meeting the government's target to provide vaccines to those who wanted them by fall 2021. In closing, Mr. Chair, PSPC employed a procurement strategy that covered all the bases to secure vaccines to protect Canadians. And it has proven effective.
To evolve our vaccine procurement strategy based on the best scientific advice available, including securing new formulations for variants, boosters in pediatrics as they become available and approved by Health Canada. Thank you. I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you all very, very much. We'll now turn to our members. The first round, each member will have 6 minutes. Dr. Ellis, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. Certainly, having been a physician in charge of a regional COVID unit, this has very personal meaning for me with respect to now having a look at lessons learned. I guess I'll take a bit of umbrage with the AG report in terms of saying $1 billion worth of wasted vaccines is acceptable or expected or reasonable or successful, perhaps. That's the word that was used on behalf of Canadians. I think that's a bit appalling. That is, of course, directly related to Vaccine Connect. Total cost of $59.1 million, of which $37.4 million was paid. We know that this was a failing system. People were using spreadsheets in this day and age is absolutely shocking. Simple question, did we pay the remaining $21.7 million, and why did we?
Maybe indicate who you're directing the question to,
Sure.
Dr. Lewis.
How about Dr. Lucas?
I'll pass to Dr. Kochar on that question.
So most of the money would, so the contract was with a contracting firm which was providing that services to us, and the rest of the money was actually spent in terms of making sure that we have the infrastructure available to make sure that that works. And Luke Gagnon is online in case you need a little bit more on that.
That's fine, thank you. So much like Arrive Scam, we continue to pay for an app that didn't work. Not surprising. That being said, a question perhaps, again, it's hard with so many up there to know who to direct this to. So we've lost probably $1 billion worth of vaccines. How many contracts are there now outstanding, and how much more vaccine are we going to actually lose?
We, Mr. Chair, we have many contracts which are in currently, which we have based on the advanced purchase agreement. They are with different vaccine manufacturers. The details are with our colleagues in PSPC, but just reminding that these are evolving scenarios with bivalent vaccines coming on board too. So we continue to move to obtain those specific vaccines which are current and which we can use on Canadian population.
Well, that's fine. Thank you for that response. The question, though, is how many more vaccines are we on the hook for? What are we going to do with them? Are we going to lose them because we can't track expiry dates and cost us another multi-billions of dollars? Perhaps Ms. Reza could answer that.
Thank you for the question. As Harpreet alluded to, we have 7 APAs. I think 6 of them have received regulatory approval. We had an opportunity to purchase up to 412 million doses. Some of those are firm, some of those are options that are triggered at the request of Canada. We continue to work with all of the suppliers to adjust the supply based on demand.
So I guess my question then is, how many of those are firm contracts? How much money are we on the hook for?
Each of the APAs have a firm portion to them, usually reflective of the type of...
I get that part. How much is it?
I think we'll have to come back to you with details. They range in about, do we have the number of firm contracts on hand, or firm doses? Since it's a very, just if I could add a footnote on this, it is a constantly evolving field. So for example, there's usually a minimum of 20 million firm doses per APA. There are additional doses as it relates to boosters and various elements, and when there's a decision based on public health need to trigger options of certain types of platform.
Doctor, just let me interrupt. You can request the documents be sent to the committee. I think the offer was made, but if you would like to make that request, we will follow up on that. So if you could do that, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make that request, please. And I guess you look at it, there's 7 APAs, 20 million doses per, $30 a dose on average. Wow, that's a lot of money that we're going to be out given the uptake in this thing. I'll come back to this probably in my next round of questioning, but CanSino, obviously a significant failure on behalf of this Liberal government. How much was paid to CanSino in the contracts?
PSPC cannot speak to CanSino. It was not part of the 7 APAs that we negotiated. It would have to be redirected, I believe, to ISED.
So, Mr. Chair, what you're telling me here is that we're doing a review on vaccines. We have a Liberal government that failed to procure vaccines early for Canadians because they put all the proverbial eggs in one basket with respect to CanSino, which delayed getting vaccines to Canadians by at least 3 months and probably cost the economy $80 billion. And nobody knows the answer here at this very esteemed panel as to how much we paid CanSino. Perhaps, Dr. Lucas, you can answer that.
Mr. Chair, what I would indicate is that the advance purchase agreements with the 7 manufacturers were concluded between the summer and fall of 2020. The first vaccine authorized, the Pfizer vaccine, in early December 2020 was within days of the initial authorization in the United Kingdom, and vaccine doses were delivered in December 2020.
Sorry, just to interrupt. I asked about CanSino.
In regard to early access to vaccines by Canadians, there was not an advance purchase agreement with CanSino. And further questions, as Ms. Reza from PSPC indicated, could be directed to officials from Innovation and Science and Economic Development pertaining to that.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Turning now to Ms. Bradford.
Thank you,
6
Mr.
minutes.
Chair. And thank you to all of our many witnesses today. This committee has looked at a number of issues revolving around COVID and government response to it at the time. And I think, this far out away from the initial crisis, we tend to forget what an uncertain time that was and how little we understood what we were dealing with, what the disease was, and how to effectively treat it and conquer it. So I think it's important to kind of go back to that. So I think it's good that you, without knowing what the winners would be, because nobody knew what the effective vaccines were, we did not put all our eggs in one basket. We had 7 different vaccines that we were investigating. And so by the end of May 2022, the Public Health Agency reported that 82% of eligible people at that time had received at least 2 doses. I think that's quite remarkable, actually, under the circumstances, but it's always good to compare. Is there any one of you that could maybe address, I don't know if it's Mr. Lucas, how that compares with other similar countries, like the uptake in the US, UK, Germany?
Mr. Chair, I'll probably try to answer that question. So Canada, amongst the G7 countries, had the highest rate of the primary vaccination, and that continues to be that. As of today, we have 80.7% of primary series coverage as of January 29th, which, again, reminding that we moved from 12 years old to 5 to 12 years, and then pediatrics, and where the uptake has been, calculated. And we are also amongst the 2 top who have delivered the booster vaccinations, 44% for Japan, 26% for Canada. So we are amongst the leaders in terms of early vaccination, completion of the primary doses, as well as boosters, which were actually administered to the Canadian population.
Thank you for that. I think Canadians should be congratulated for taking care of themselves and their neighbors, protecting each other, because that's what you have to do with the global pandemic. I want to turn my questions now to looking at the lack of sharing of data and how that's being addressed, and how critical that is. As we've seen in the report, the pandemic highlighted issues that make it a challenge to collect, share, and use health data. And we know that good health data is crucial in public health emergencies and leads to improvement in health outcomes for Canadians long term. I'm not sure who would know this, probably Health Canada, maybe PHAC. What's the status of the development of the Pan-Canadian Health Data Strategy? It's referred to several times in the report. And what's the Government of Canada doing to expedite its work with the provinces and territories to complete the Pan-Canadian Health Data Strategy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As was noted, the critical importance of health data in informing both public health and healthcare responses was highlighted in the pandemic, as well as in the report of the Auditor General. During the course of the pandemic, the Public Health Agency and Health Canada worked extensively with provinces and territories to further support and facilitate data information sharing, including working with them towards common interoperability standards so data systems can communicate with each other in the country. We have been working with provinces and territories and other stakeholders, informed by advice from an expert advisory group chaired by Dr. Vivek Goul, on developing a pan-Canadian health data strategy to facilitate the collection, sharing, use, and public reporting of health data. This work has continued with health officials, and elements of the strategy will be discussed tomorrow at the working meeting of the Prime Minister with premiers.
Oh, right. Okay, so what are some of the key barriers to information sharing between the jurisdictions? And how important is federal-provincial territorial collaboration to overcoming these barriers? So I'm glad it is going to be on the table for discussion tomorrow. But so what seems to be the problem with getting all the players to share the data?
Mr. Chair, as I noted, there are technical barriers in terms of systems being able to connect, but work is advancing on that, looking to align with international standards, working with Canada Health Infoway and provinces and territories and other key stakeholders on that. It's important, of course, to protect the privacy of Canadians in terms of health data, and work is underway to ensure that while enabling the safe stewardship of that information to support public health response or health care response, such as sharing health information between GPs and specialists to support the care of patients. In addition, we see the importance of enabling common definitions of the data through data content standards, and the Canadian Institutes for Health Information has been supporting work on this. And then in specific areas such as vaccination data, extensive work was done, as was highlighted by Dr. Kochar. To enable that, further steps are required, but again, looking to support aligning standards, policies, and commitments to share that data to support the health of Canadians.
Okay, that's great. Ms. Reza, can you maybe explain how you were able to meet the moment in the face of the tremendous urgency while still ensuring that the proper due diligence was in place to make sure that these things were going to be safe and effective?
Ms. Reza, you have time just for a brief answer, but I will allow you to answer.
We actually took the lessons that we learned from the pandemic PPE buy. We really focused on due diligence, understanding, and being an informed buyer. So spending as much time as we could in the planning phases, working with the provinces and territories to look at their ancillary vaccine needs, building a logistic supply chain, being resilient, and bringing the whole government interdepartmentally ready to make sure that we could access those supplies or those vaccines as early as possible.
Thank you very much. Bonjour, Mr. Perron. Vous avez la parole pour 6
Mr. Perron, 6 minutes. Thank you so much, and thank you to the members of the committee and also all the witnesses for coming here to answer our questions. I'm going to begin with Mrs. Hogan. In your report, you speak of the persistence of problems with regards to data exchange, and we talked about this a few minutes ago with Mrs. Bradford. To what extent do you think that these problems linked to data exchange could be responsible for the wastage of $1 billion of vaccine doses? I don't think that's acceptable, and we have to find a solution to this. I'd like to hear what you have to say. It's hard to estimate to what extent we can link that the expiry date arrived, that the vaccine was not used, to a system. But it didn't help the process. The system in Vaccine Connect had abilities that were not connected. Some files lead to human error, but also there was a lack of information. There was also a loss of information once the vaccines were delivered to provinces. A system would have helped to minimize wastage. So there's no direct link, but if we don't know what we don't know, if we don't know the expiry dates, it's hard to manage it adequately. And what is really shocking is that Canada was committed to provide doses to other countries, and these vaccines were wasted in a context where we were having new variants emerge, and we were trying to participate in the global vaccination effort. It was a way to minimize this. And so it's important that this be in the minutes. This type of thing should never happen again. I find it's unbelievable in a G7 country that we cannot exchange data in an efficient manner. Now, I'd like to speak with officials from PHAC with regards to the wastage and also with regards to the computer system. What is happening right now? You said a few minutes ago, oh, we have an action plan, but are you going ahead with it? If there's a new event in 6 months, in 1 year, 2 years, will we be better prepared?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will pass it on to Luke, but just mentioning this, that Vaccine Connect, as was launched in 2021, is an agile, modular digital platform which is developed to address these urgent needs of data. But Luke, if I can pass it on to you, please.
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you for the question. In fact, this is an evolving platform. The choices that were made to develop functionalities early on in the pandemic were based on the need to deliver vaccines as quickly as possible throughout the country, and that's what we did. The reason why we didn't have the expiry dates, one of the main reasons, is that provinces and territories were busy in delivering vaccines. They were deploying new techniques in order to be able to administer vaccines to citizens, to all Canadians, and they did not always have the staff or the systems in order to do the data entry into the Vaccine Connect. So to improve, what we do is we have a new deliverable that will start in March. There was a deliverable for November, another one in March, because right now we are very agile, and this will facilitate the sharing of this data. This is what we're doing right now with regards to the digital technology. Thank you, Mr. Gagnon. So I understand that things are moving, but what I see, when I see reports from the Auditor General, and she's oftentimes highlighted issues with regards to data systems over many years, and so it would be desirable. I don't understand why you're talking about a program that's underway. That's fine, but why did you have to create this program after such an important, a huge amount of waste? Why didn't you not just take into account the recommendations of the Auditor General? We have an Auditor General. Her job is to identify issues. Normally, things should be done more quickly. Do you have any answer to provide to me?
Merci pour la...
Thank you for the question. Once again, there's the digital side, and this can help to go more quickly. We can automate some data exchange processes, but we were in a situation where we were delivering vaccines with new technologies, new information was being provided, and all of this had to happen at the same time, and that's why we had some of these issues from the onset. The issue of interoperability is really important, and I think that it was mentioned earlier that people are working on it. So this work is underway, and the deliverable is for March to have a more integrated system. Thank you. Now quickly, Mr. Gagnon, I also see that you retained the services of Deloitte Incorporated to improve these computer issues. 2 questions. 1, do you not have internal resources to manage computer systems? And 2, can we have an idea of how much this is costing? Thank you for the question. So, yes, Deloitte provided the platform. We were in the middle of a global pandemic and resources were tight. We're talking about IT resources. They have to develop functionalities, provide platforms, and our teams worked tirelessly, 18-hour days, in order to allow Canadians to obtain vaccines. We needed outside help. Deloitte won the competition, and so they provided the platform and also developers to help us to develop functionalities. Thank you, Mr. Gagnon. Your time is up.
Puis finalement, Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor for
6 minutes.
Thank the witnesses for being present and, of course, the Auditor General for this report. I do want to bring attention to the committee Exhibit 9.3, and it's been touched on today, of course, in relation to the amount of dosage waiting for donation. So it shows that 50.6 million doses waited for donation. Of that, 13.6 million had already expired by May of 2022. So these life-saving doses were wasted, largely. We can see that Canada did manage to donate 15.3 million doses by May of 2022, to which I believe that there is some credit due to the public service for their good work in that, and being able to assist people, not just here, but around the world in combating this deadly disease. However, this does leave another 21.7 million doses that have been offered by the federal government, but we're still waiting for donation as of May of last year. And so this is the part that I believe Canadians deserve a really credible and really sound answer for. And I think that it was touched on and alluded to by some of my colleagues here, but trying to understand how this number is so high. I think that's the issue here. If it was a small number, I think Canadians would be relatively fine. But just the sheer size of it, 21.7 million doses that were offered by the federal government, but we're still waiting for donation as of May of last year. And I do also want to remind my fellow colleagues and, of course, our witnesses here that most of these doses had already expired by the end of 2022. And so there's some issues here in some way. So my question, I guess directed to Dr. Kochar, please, would be how many of the 21.7 million doses were successfully donated to countries in need of vaccines?
Mr. Chair, I'll just start by mentioning that we have been very, very diligent in working with COVAX, which is, an international way of making sure that donations are equitably distributed. And we have been able to donate. We offered almost 41.5 million doses as the doses became available. We also did bilateral with 37 countries, and we were able to move 3.76 million doses through direct bilateral agreements with them.
Sorry, Doctor, just very specifically, just because this time is limited, of the 21.7 million, how many were successfully delivered?
Can I pass it to you? Numbers are probably different.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. In the context of vaccine donations, I think the number that you're referring to is in the context of some AstraZeneca doses that we had, and I think you referred to 13 million doses that expired. Those were put on offer as soon as we were able to make them available in 2021. And unfortunately, COVAX was unable to place those doses in countries because there wasn't sufficient demand.
So how many were wasted, you'd say? So of the 21.7, how many were wasted? You just said that they were unable to deliver them to those countries. Does that mean all the 21.7 million, or does that mean 10 million? Like, what is the estimate here?
The 13 million dose number that you cited for AstraZeneca doses were the doses that were lost because they were not able to be placed. The remainder were donated to countries. And to bring precision to Dr. Kochar's mention in terms of the countries that we've been able to support, through both COVAX and through bilateral donations, we've been able to provide doses to 37 countries around the world.
So 13.6 million wasted vaccines?
Of AstraZeneca vaccine.
That's correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, I think that's my answer. Thank you very much. To the Auditor General, I think looking at the finding in Exhibit 9.55 of your report, you state that, quote, the agency was not able to properly track vaccine surplus and wastage once vaccines were delivered to the provinces and territories, end quote. And that, quote, lack of data sharing agreements with provinces and territories affected the agency's capacity to gather information on the inventory, wastage, and expiry of COVID-19 vaccines. So I do recognize the tremendous difficulty that, of course, this would place on the public service's ability to actually monitor and track that, considering you rely on the partners, well, at least we would hope so, in the context of their reporting of their need. And so to the Auditor General, the lack of data sharing agreements with provinces and territories, that's something I think that's important for Canadians to understand. So in light of that finding, and from what we've just heard of the 13.6 million figure that were wasted, we just heard, is it likely that there's a greater percentage of wastage, considering that we weren't able to actually know how the provinces handled their vaccine dosage?
I do think that's one of the issues that we were trying to raise, is that the federal government actually loses some visibility in what happens to the doses once they've been delivered to the provinces and territories. Vaccine Connect was supposed to help with creating some awareness of where those doses were used, administered, or expired. But the longstanding issue about not having data sharing agreements is it just doesn't allow the provinces and territories to let the federal government know, where the information is, how to share it. Those have been longstanding, where an agreement needs to be in place back to 1999. Just to highlight, you asked about the 21.7 million doses that were waited to be donated back in early December when these reports were released. At the time, the department had confirmed to me that 8 million had been donated, and 1 million of those 21.7 it had expired. So that was early December. So I can offer up that additional information following your exchange earlier with the other witness.
My time, Chair? Do I have enough for a question? Well, John?
You have about 15 seconds.
Excellent. Well, I don't have enough time for my next question, but I'd like to thank you all for your information today. And I think that on behalf of Canadians, this is an important piece to realize, is that data sharing is an incredibly important piece to understanding our visibility in the provinces, territories, and of course nationally. So I'll follow up on that my next round. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Turning on to the next round, Mr. Cram, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I guess I will start with the Auditor General. In October of 2021, Bob McCown from the CBC's Fifth Estate ran an investigative report about CanSino. I would like to read a couple of quotes from a couple of articles here. The subheading of one article reads, "Federal officials wasted months, spent millions on a lab that never produced a single shot." And in another article, it reads, "The National Research Council of Canada signed an agreement with Tianjin-based CanSino Biologics in early May 2020 to fast-track the availability of a COVID-19 vaccine in Canada for emergency pandemic use." So, Ms. Hogan, are you familiar with the CBC's Fifth Estate and this investigative report?
I do believe at the time that I had seen it, but that company was not one of the 7 companies that an advance purchase agreement had been signed with, and hence were not scoped into our audit, which was looking at how the government responded to the need for vaccines and procured them for the country.
So this agreement signed in May of 2020 with the National Research Council, why would that not be relevant in terms of vaccine procurement for Canada?
So as I mentioned, Mr. Chair, it wasn't one of the 7 advance purchase agreements, and we were focused in on how the government ensured there was sufficient doses for all Canadians in the country that wanted to be vaccinated.
Okay, so I couldn't help noticing at the beginning of the report, there was no mention of the National Research Council at all. Given that the National Research Council was involved in these negotiations with CanSino and did sign at least one agreement, could you just elaborate on your thought process as to why? So did you reach out to the National Research Council in doing this audit? Like why were they not included at all?
We did speak to them at the beginning of the audit when we were scoping. But as I mentioned, it wasn't a contract that resulted in an advance purchase agreement for vaccines for the country, so they were not included in the scope of our audit.
Could you inform the committee as what they had to say on lessons learned from dealing with CanSino in establishing the vaccine task force, and what what lessons learned, what the vaccine task force learned from this experience with CanSino?
You have anything to share? Unfortunately, because they weren't scoped in, I don't have any information to share with the committee about CanSino.
Okay. When was the National Vaccine Task Force established?
I don't know who you would like to answer, but I know that the Vaccine Task Force made a recommendation in late June about companies that would be viable to have vaccines, but I would hand it over perhaps to Mr. Lucas to expand.
Mr. Chair, the Vaccine Task Force was established in May 2020 and provided advice to the government through the Ministers of Health and Innovation, Science and Economic Development in terms of its assessment of all vaccines being developed globally. That led to the recommendations for the 7 candidates across a range of vaccine platforms. That then led to decisions on the advanced purchase agreements with those 7 companies.
So on page 6 of the report, it spells out the dates in which these advanced purchase agreements were signed between Canada and the various companies. I've gone to Google and looked up when the American government signed the same advanced purchase agreements. The Americans signed their first contract on March 27th of 2020, and then another in May of on May 21st. And the Americans, they were finishing all of their advanced purchase agreements at the end of July, just as we were getting started. Can anyone explain why we were so many months behind the Americans in signing these advanced purchase agreements?
Mr. Chair, I'll respond and then turn to Ariane Riza. The United States government, through their Operation Warp Speed, was focused on supporting the research and development of the vaccines, working with those companies. Elements of those included purchase commitments. The Government of Canada launched the Vaccine Task Force in May 2020, and it provided outstanding recommendations to us, which allowed for the initial agreement with Moderna to be signed in July 2020, one of the first in the world with Moderna. And I would note that we received submissions from the companies for regulatory approval in fall 2020 at the same time or shortly linked to the time.
I'm afraid that is the time. I do try to allow witnesses to answer and allow a little overtime, but I do have to stay within some semblance of the time. Turning now to Mr. Fragaskatos, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to officials for being here, in particular to all of you in the public service that contributed so much during the pandemic. I know that you made enormous sacrifices being away from friends and family, and that's something that is not lost on any of us, regardless of the fact that we have to ask hard questions sometimes. I think that point needs recognition. Ms. Hogan, if I could go to you first. Imperfect, naturally. Something like this is not going to work, and I don't think Canadians are expecting a perfect approach to have been taken by the government, by the public service, because we're talking about such a rare event, a 1 in 100 year pandemic. And it's important, of course, to highlight lessons learned and areas to improve on, certainly. But your report uses the word efficient 14 times. So clearly you think that there is something to be said, a great deal to be said, about the efficiency of the overall process. Could you speak to that?
I like to try and take everybody back to March of 2020. I think many of us want to forget that time, but it was a time of great uncertainty, a time where there was a global race to determine who would be able to manufacture vaccines. Then add on the layer of, will they be approved for use in Canada? And so our view was that the approach taken by the government to sign so many advanced purchase agreements was a prudent one in the circumstances to ensure that every Canadian who wanted to be vaccinated could be vaccinated. And we found that Public Service and Procurement Canada expedited their procurement process and still followed some elements that we had highlighted earlier on in the personal protective equipment audit that they actually then addressed. They looked at financial capabilities of the companies. They did integrity checks to ensure that organizations would minimize the risk of unethical business practices. So we felt that there was a good adjustment, and that's why we highlighted that this was an efficient procurement process. I think the last thing I would highlight is that provinces and territories receive doses on average within 2 days of putting a request into the federal government. When you think about how vast our country is and the need to temperature control a lot of the vaccines going to remote areas, it was an efficient delivery process as well. So I think the public servants should be commended for what they did to help the country respond to the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Auditor General. If I could go to Deputy Minister Lucas, we've heard the United States mentioned. It was just brought up in the previous questioning by my colleague. Do we have a different line of questioning here, but I think it's still relevant to look at Canada and the United States. Do we have data, Deputy Minister, on the number of lives saved in per capita terms if we compare Canada and the United States in terms of the vaccine approach taken in the two countries?
On compared, Mr. Chair, I don't have the comparative numbers offhand. I do know, however, the Public Health Agency has done a modeling which has been published of the counterfactual, what would have happened had there not been access to vaccines. And I'll turn to Dr. Kochar to provide that information from a Canadian perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as Dr. Lucas said, we have done a study in which we've modeled, and almost 800,000 lives were saved, and 1.9 million hospitalizations were avoided, and 34 million COVID cases prevented by making sure that there was early access to vaccines and we had public health measures in place. And this, of course, in an independent study by C.D. Howe, also said that it was around $2.1 billion in savings associated with missed work and treatment, and also a 6-month delay in vaccination, Mr. Chair, would have led to a loss of $156 billion in economic activities in 2021. This is a C.D. Howe report which has been published already.
Thank you very much. It's an important point. I do have another question, but my timer says that I have about 20 seconds left, unless you want to give me an extra couple minutes, Mr. Chair.
No, I think we're done.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Tournant Mr. Perron, vous avez la parole pour 2 minutes 30 secondes.
2.5 minutes, Mr. Perron. Thank you very much. I recognize everything that has been stated with regards to delivery, etc. It's not only a dire picture, but our work here at the committee is to see how did we lose $1 billion worth of vaccines. That's a lot of money for the average Canadian. And looking towards the future also, March 2020, yes, of course, everyone was doing their best, but now we have to not be flailing around if this happens again. This is why we have to insist on local production. And I have fears because you've probably heard that Medicago is closing. This is in the Quebec region. I'd like to know why this is happening and what's being done in order to preserve this knowledge, this expertise, and the workers that are there. Mr. Lucas, perhaps?
President.
Mr. Chair. This was a business decision made by Mitsubishi. It's the parent company. And obviously, we are closely following the file and looking at the next steps. And if possible, we will try to preserve the talent pool and the research abilities of Medicago.
Broadly, the government has invested over $2.1 billion in a biomanufacturing life science strategy to support numerous businesses across Canada in all stages of vaccine and therapy production, including an agreement with Moderna to establish a manufacturing facility.
Mr. Lucas, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have a short time in the second round. So in the case of Medicago, wasn't there not a long approval time? If I look at Pfizer, was approved in December 2020. Medicago obtained agreement only in February 2022. Is there something that we can analyze to do things better?
Thank you.
Le temps d'approbation.
The approval time for a vaccine depends on the date that the file arrives at Health Canada from the company. And the data that is provided.
Et désolé, non, c'est le
Sorry, time is up.
2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I do want to just continue on the same vein of my colleague from the bloc in relation to domestic vaccine production. And I think many Canadians, of course, when the pandemic hit, asked the question of where are Canada's vaccines? And it's a question that we haven't returned to in many ways in light of course, the traumatic experience many Canadians have had. And of course, we were able to sustain ourselves with the kind of purchasing agreements we had from the private sector. But I do want to mention the risks of that and the issues that some Canadians may have with it, in particular in light of the wasted vaccines. I think there's evidence to suggest that wasted vaccines is a waste of taxpayer dollar. And so when considering that these agreements that Canadians have been in many ways forced into, not by any kind of prejudice of public service, of course, but because of our needs as a country, has allowed for a disservice, I believe, in Canada. And so each authorized vaccine comes with an obligation to purchase a specific quantity of doses along with, and aside from one agreement, options to purchase additional doses. So that's what I understand from procurement's point of view. The problem here is that we are reliant on companies like Pfizer or Moderna's purchasing agreements rather than Canada's public health needs. And so this, I think, is a really important part to note, that when it comes to needs of Canadians and the needs of these companies, both different. This leads to sending billions of dollars in some ways, whether by wasted vaccines or not, of taxpayer dollars to big pharmaceutical companies that we're now bound to having minimum purchase agreements with. That is a tough pill to swallow, I think, for many Canadians. So my question, in many ways, I suppose, would be maybe procurement could start, and then maybe the Public Health Agency, if they had any other comments on it, would be in relation to whether or not a Crown corporation that would be able to produce domestically Canadian-produced vaccines, would they be able to better deliver the actual public health need than a private company that would require a minimum amount to purchase?
Mr. Chair, I'll respond. As I noted to the previous honourable member, the government has invested in a biomanufacturing life science strategy, which is invested in further establishing all aspects from vaccine and therapeutic production to fill and finish of the final bottles. That includes an agreement with Moderna to establish facility in Quebec.
But would it do a better job?
In addition to that, the National Research Council has established a biologics manufacturing center so that we are diversifying our ability to respond quickly and here in Canada to the threat of a new...
Do you recognize there's a waste there?
That is the time. Thank you very, very much. You'll have another opportunity, Mr. Gillet. Turning now again to Dr. Ellis. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. So many things to say, so little time. I guess it's important to point out some comments with respect to the Auditor General that this was a successful program. Not only did we lose $1 billion, but realistically, what we were asking people to do here was keep track of things and distribute a product at a cold temperature. That happens all the time in this world. And I guess I find it very, very difficult for anyone to say that this is a successful program. We also had a deal with CanSino. We put all of our eggs in one basket, which everybody here refuses to talk about, but that resulted in a 3-month delay of getting vaccines into the arms of Canadians. And it also led to, and I'm not sure why, Dr. Co-Chair, you said this, talking about the diligent nature that we use. The COVAX program is taking 2 million doses from a program which was supposed to be able to distribute, first and foremost, vaccines in an equitable fashion to the entire world, but then focusing on the developing nations. We're the only G7 country that took vaccines from the COVAX program. Shame, 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 shame. And I have to say, shame on you, Auditor General, for saying that keeping track of things and maintaining temperature is not a new science. We didn't do this well, and if we did it the same way again and we lost another $1 billion, and now we're on the hook of for at least $4.2 billion worth of contracts that we don't even know what we're going to do with this vaccine. So is this a good use of Canadians' money? A loss of $5 billion? That may have been even able to fund the terrible healthcare system that after 8 years of these Liberals that we now have. I'd like to return to Medicago. Very simply, in these Government of Canada documents, this government has poured in probably more than $500 million into Medicago. I have two very simple questions. Number one is, who owns the intellectual property that was developed with Medicago? And secondly, are we also on the hook for 20 million doses that we purchased from Medicago, which again would be, oh, I don't know, just a shoddy $600 million? Anybody know the answer to that question here in this esteemed panel?
Thank you very much for the question. I'll start with your question about the Medicago and APA, the 20 million firm doses. This is under active negotiation as we speak, given the news from Medicago and the need from the public health sector to reduce that delivery.
So I guess I'm not clear, Mr. Chair. Are you telling me that we're trying to negotiate our way out of a $600 million contract?
Mr. Chair, I'm saying that with the recent news from Mitsubishi and Medicago, coupled with the demand and our constant review of contracts, that there's active negotiations going on right now, looking at the 20 million doses and what can be done to adjust it.
Okay, well, thank you. I think, Mr. Chair, anybody want to answer the IP? Who owns the IP now? Is it Mitsubishi Tanabe who now owns it? The Government of Canada, as I said, pumped almost $1 billion into this company. Who owns the IP?
So, Mr. Chair, this is something which is in active conversation between the company and the ISED, who are the key interlocutors from Government of Canada, which is the industry, and that conversation is going on as such in terms of those details.
Just one, Dr. Lucas, did you something? You kind of had an open question, Dr. Lucas. Did you have something to add there as well? I know you went to your mic, but if you can say no, and that's no problem. But I wanted to give you the opportunity.
No on this specific one, but I just think it's important to note for the record that based on the world-leading experts on the vaccine task force, purchase agreements were put in place, vaccines were authorized, and doses delivered to Canadians within days of any other country in the world, and we had the single highest level of primary dose vaccination in the G7, saving hundreds of thousands of lives.
Thank you. Back to you, Doctor.
BBC article in February 2021 that we were the worst in the world. And that was in the early days. We had the Delta variant then, when many of us on the front line thought we were going to die. And guess what happened? Our country teamed up with a Chinese company to put all of our eggs in one basket in a company called CanSino, which now we don't even want to talk about. Shameful. I think, finally, the Medicago fiasco needs to be solved, and I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was spot on time. I thought I have to rein you in. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to first express my extreme disappointment with some of the words that were used by the member that just spoke. This is a committee that prides itself, and Chair, I would like you to speak up the next time that a member here disparages the witnesses that appear in front of us, especially the Auditor General. The integrity of the Auditor General is something that we all hold.
Order. I try not to interrupt members. Ms. Shanahan has the floor, and the government's been respectful of opposition members. I'd ask the same be true. Back to you, Ms. Shanahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, because this is the work that we're here to do. It is to look at what has happened and to make to learn lessons and to understand how we can do better next time. And quite frankly, the hundreds of thousands of lives that were saved, to me, is a success. But I'd like to turn the microphone over to the Auditor General. Please tell us more about your investigation and what you found in this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My comments earlier on were about the efficiency of procurement and ensuring that every Canadian who wanted to be vaccinated could be vaccinated. There's always two sides to every coin, and obviously there are things that needed to be done better. The lack of data sharing agreements with the provinces and territories, which has existed since 1999, is a concern that this country needs to address. It requires all levels of government to come together in order to ensure that we know what health data information should be shared, when it should be shared, how it should be shared, and having the IT infrastructure behind it. So absolutely, there is a lot of good lessons to be learned here, but also a lot of important successes that should be recognized, which is what our report did. It was very balanced in looking at both angles. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time to address our report.
So something that has come up here a number of times, and certainly it is the part of this part of the job of this Public Accounts Committee to look at value for money and wastage and so on. But Auditor General, you did say that some wastage was to be expected. Now we're looking at an emergency situation. What kind of information do we have, or basis of guidelines to, like, what percentage of wastage can be expected? Because I'm thinking, if we're in a war and we win the war, are we then looking at the number of bullets that we used and say, well, maybe we used too many bullets? I mean, what is the context here in this emergency situation?
So unfortunately, I don't have that. Perhaps one of the other witnesses from the health industry might be able to add on that. What I would offer up is that vaccines can be wasted for many reasons. They could expire on a shelf, but once a vial is open, it might not all be used. There's wastage just in transportation, so there's lots of reasons. And with that, I'll see if perhaps someone from one of the departments could provide a more specific answer to you.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll attempt to clarify that wastage is really inevitable in any immunization program. When we started initially the vaccination campaign, the unavoidable wastage was around 3%. When, basically you open the vial, you have to use it in the 24-hour time period, or it cannot be stored back, and so on. And as we moved further into our vaccination campaign, the demand decreased, and so there were some other factors which meant that from wastage perspective, there was an increased wastage. Now, in reality, what happened was that there are timings where we had some of the vaccines which were very complex in terms of early in the rollout. As I said, you have to thaw them. You have a limited time period to use them. Now, also, as we went on with other vaccines, the stability data became more in such that the ability for us to say that this vaccine could be used in 9 months, Health Canada authorized, for example, based on what was presented to them, an increase in the shelf life. So we had continued to plan according to the 9-month, and so there were multiple factors which happened. Cold chain excursions, puncturing of the vial once, unable to store that at a particular temperature, and those were multiple factors which contributed to some wastage, which is unavoidable.
And thank you. That is a time, and I did pause the clock when I spoke as well, Ms. Shanahan. So turning now to Mr. McCauley, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. It's nice to see my Liberal colleagues stand up for the AG after refusing to stand up when the Minister of Revenue attacked her repeatedly publicly in the House of Commons. Dr. Kocher, a couple of quick questions for yourself. You mentioned the shelf life was extended on some of these drugs. How are we extending them? Is just science saying, oh, wait a moment, this is just the best before date? Just a brief answer, please.
I think Dr. Lourenco could speak to it.
The vaccines are initially authorized with a certain shelf life, and the manufacturer provides additional data for us to be able to extend the shelf life.
Dr., you mentioned as well about Canada being an early leader in acquiring vaccine. I'm looking at data February 21st, 3% of Canadians had the vaccine, 21% in the UK, 14% in the US. Like, in what way are we an early leader? Like, we've seen reports, it was, you know, during the worst of times, daily in the National Post, they were publishing where we were on the list of vaccines. Yes, we pre-acquired tons, enough for everyone, but in what way were we an early acquirer when we did not catch up to the US, UK, Israel, Japan until months later?
Mr. Chair, when we signed the 7 APAs, that was the component where we actually locked in most of the vaccine manufacturers who could really produce a safe and effective vaccine.
Right, but that's signing. That's not acquiring. I think, again, it almost feels like we're pushing a false narrative with the study of how successful the government was, ignoring the fact that we were late to the game in acquiring. Like, you know, in this country, we like to put up our noses at how the Americans do, but they were almost 5 times the amount vaccinated compared to us in February. The Brits were 7 times greater, and yet we're claiming because we signed something, we didn't actually have vaccines in the arms of Canadians, but the intent was there. I don't think that's an adequate description to say we're an advanced leader. So I'll leave it at that. I just want to ask, Auditor General, you talked about the data sharing. It goes back to 1999. Like, if you think about 1999, we were singing like the Prince song, 1999, and yet here we are 24 years later and we still do not have it. What's lacking? Is it the provinces just saying, yeah, we're not interested? Is it lack of will of federal government? Like, you've brought it up 4 times. Surely you think the government would have reacted by now.
I don't know if I can speak to the reasons why. If I did, I would have put them in the report if I had identified them. I guess I offer up that I'm not sure how many more health crises that we need to live through before we realize the importance of needing to share this information across the country. Some of these are H1N1, SARS, and now COVID, and this has always been the same issue.
Deja vu all over again with your reports?
On this issue, for sure, it would be great for the country to resolve the Pan-Canadian Health Sharing Agreement and to have a system in place to help support the country better respond to a health crisis in the future.
Yeah. Can I ask why you didn't address the CanSino delay in your report? Like, who decided that we're only going to study the acquisition of these 7 chosen ones?
So as I mentioned earlier on, it was a decision we made in the scoping in order to keep our audit focused on the advanced purchase agreements that we're actually going to bring vaccines to be able to vaccinate Canadians.
Okay. We have about 45 seconds. I'm going to ask kind of an open question. The advanced purchase, can someone provide to this committee how much we've spent so far, what we've purchased physically, what we have in inventory, what we've thrown out, and what are we in the hook for going forward? One of the witnesses was talking about the new bivalent. Like, are we on the hook for these booster shots, or are they covered under if we pre-agree 50 million from Pfizer? Are we the new booster shots? Are they on top of those 50 for our obligation?
Mr. McCauley, can I just, instead of making it open, could you direct it to someone, please? Unless someone has an answer, or I think that would be helpful.
Whoever would have that information, raise your hand and consider it directed. Perfect. We'll go to you. We're out of time, so you can get back to us, please, with all that.
Oh, I will allow you. You're preempted. I will allow a brief.
5 seconds over, sir.
I stop it when I talk. I will allow a brief answer, please. Thank you, Doctor.
So very briefly, we have received 164 million doses in Canada. Our agreements do give us access to the latest and greatest formulations and pediatrics.
What are we obligated for to buy? How many shots?
And now I'll have to cut it off.
You can get back to us, please.
Yes. Well, you'll have to ask for the information, I think. Mr. Dong, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. And I would like to thank the AG and the for doing the report, and thank all the public service. I can only imagine how difficult at those times that every country is fighting to access even APAs, access those vaccines. I find it, first of all, I find it a little hilarious listening to the questions today. Um, you know, First it was, sounds like we bought too many vaccines and we're wasting the vaccines. And then we're hearing that, we haven't secured enough early on. And I think it's usually we get that from two different parties. Usually the conservative talk about the liberal government hasn't done enough, and NDP or vice versa. But today we're hearing from the same source. I find it a little hilarious, and I just can't help to think that perhaps as Canadians, we are the way we think is we're a bit spoiled, and we take it for granted because on regular basis, Canada, as Canadians, we can access pretty much everything, all the technology is available to humankind. In the situation of world pandemic, this time we did struggle a little bit to knowing that we don't have the capacity to produce the vaccines, and knowing that every country around the world is competing to access early on those vaccines. So, given the circumstances, I think I'm very thankful to actually go through the report and reading the details about how those vaccines were acquired and what could be done better preparing us in the future. If I may ask the staff to explain the logistics of after the vaccines are obtained by the federal government, and how are those being distributed to provinces and communities, and because we also saw AG's report, provincial AG's report, at least in Ontario, talking about how some of these vaccines were not distributed fast enough, which contributed to the fact that many of those vaccines expired. And what was the thinking behind that? What was the logistic arrangement on that? And what happens at the time? What was the decision on what happens when these vaccines are close to expiry and there's no way for municipalities, for province to distribute them fast enough? What was the plan at the time?
So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So perhaps I'll just take a moment to explain how we've worked throughout the pandemic with provinces and territories on vaccine distribution. So we work as a intermediary between obviously the PTs and then down to the local level and the vaccine companies. Some provinces and territories have fairly robust logistics systems and capacity, and so they have warehousing capacity that they use, and in some cases can take delivery directly to their jurisdiction. In other cases, we hold it centrally and then distribute it to the PTs as they require it. We've put a lot of effort into over the last 2+ years in having very strong relationships with the logistics teams in each of the jurisdictions to have a good line of sight on exactly what their needs are. It has evolved over time. I think the audit has highlighted that in the early days, there was a lot of effort that had to go into building the systems, and my colleague Luc Gagnon has explained that we are now working on the technological platforms and evolving them so that we can do that more efficiently. I think that in the context of the ability to use doses, one of the things we're very keen to work with the provinces and territories on is that real-time data sharing so that we can reallocate the doses quickly if there are jurisdictions that cannot use them. We have done that on many occasions where we've polled and canvassed jurisdictions to ask them if they have additional need, and we've reallocated between jurisdictions working collaboratively with provinces and territories. The one point I would make is that when you think about the full vaccine rollout, there were thousands of points of distribution and administration that occurred across Canada, and that it was one of the challenges that we face, and we're continuing to learn from the lessons on how we can be better prepared for the next pandemic in terms of being able to have data right down to the local level. Thank you.
Okay, and I want to ask a question to Health Canada. Health Canada decided to give expedited approval process. And first of all, can you explain to the committee what's the difference between regular process and expedited process? And was at any point safety of the public or safety of these vaccines being compromised due to the expedited process?
And a brief response, please.
We'll turn to Dr. Sharma.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when we were preparing for the receipt of the submissions, there was a lot of discussions that happened before we received them in terms of the requirements, so for safety, efficacy, and quality of the vaccines. It was decided very early that we were not going to make any changes in those requirements, so maintaining the same rigorous standards that we would for all vaccines. What we did do was that we found efficiencies in terms of the review processes. So it still took the same number of hours to do the reviews, but there was less downtime. There were flexibilities on the administrative side provided to the companies so they could provide, for example, what we call a rolling submission. So as data became available, they could provide that data to us. So what we did is that we compressed the normal time for the review into a very, very short period of time.
Thank you. I know there's more to that question. I hope you'll be able to have an opportunity to come back to it as well. Monsieur Perron, encore 2 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lucas, you were saying, well, it depends. It depends when the process began to have the final approval, and you were giving the floor to Mrs. Lorenko. I don't know if you can give me an answer. Could we get the information as to how much time it took to approve each of the vaccines so that we can compare? Because the impression that we have when we look at it is that Medicago took a longer time. Maybe that's not the case. Do you have this information, or can you send it to the committee, please? Yes, I can speak on this. And if necessary, we can provide more information afterwards. For the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, it took about 2 or 3 months to assess all the data and provide an approval. For Medicago, it took a lot longer because the company took more time in submitting all the data. So the assessment began in April 2021. We received the data, the phase 3 data, only in December 2021, and afterwards we authorized the use of the Medicago vaccine in February 2022. Thank you. I would like to have detail, and that would be very much appreciated. So, Mrs. Hogan, there's a thing that bothers me, and it's a confidentiality aspect of the APAs. And I'd like to know, first of all, do you have this information? Did you have access to this information during your audit that we don't have? I can even add to your first question, and I refer you to one of the charts in our report, 9.1. It gives the date of submission for each company, and afterwards the approval. So yes, when it comes to the contracts, we did have access to all the contracts and all the information, all the adjustments and modifications. So it did not hinder your audit? No. Do you think, well, I know that you cannot share some information with the committee. This is what I'm understanding. If the committee is in camera, if we were in camera, would you be able to share this with the members of the committee? So I am required to respect confidentiality that the government links to a document, and the information is confidential for competition reasons. So I would have to consult with a lawyer, but I don't believe that I am able to. If we can look at this possibility, once again, things go really quickly.
1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to begin with Dr. Kochar. As part of the effort to draw lessons learned from managing the COVID-19 vaccine stockpile, has the Public Health Agency of Canada measured how our efforts at vaccine donation compared to those of peer countries like the United States or the EU?
So, Mr. Chair, we constantly work with the international donation COVAX. We also have a good line of sight internationally in terms of the donations. The donations market is saturated, Mr. Chair, given that there are many countries who are trying to donate, and also the receptivity of those vaccines is limited to a certain extent. So we do have a comparison, but that is an open source comparison as such.
And so in relation to some of those, when you do that analysis, when you're looking at where Canada is in relation to our peers, are we ahead, are we behind, are we in the average in terms of donations?
So, Mr. Chair, this is the donation aspect is based on the availability of the doses which each country puts forward. So, Canada mentioned very early that we will be donating 200 million doses in terms of the COVAX. But also, there are other countries who have greater access. For example, U.S. Went out and said they would be delivering 1 billion doses of Pfizer. So. It is not a comparison between the different countries. It is what is the availability of the doses which we can surplus and we can donate. But we also made effort in the very beginning to donate those vaccines very early, which we deemed that we will not be using at all, and that was that did go to the COVAX, and also we did the bilateral arrangements on that.
And in terms of finding ways to actually accelerate Canada's ability to donate while also coming up against timelines. There's real timelines to the expiry of these vaccines. We can make any number. We could say all of the vaccines will donate, but the reality is there's a real time limit and viability to that. So how many has Canada donated in a timely fashion of the 200 that have been committed?
I need a very tight answer here, please. And Mr. Digely, you have one more round, but please, you could just keep it very, very focused.
So the 200 million we have actually achieved close enough to 200 million doses. I think this is in terms of what we offered, which is around, my notes say around 196 million, I think.
And thank you very, very much. Turning now to Mr. Generous, you have the floor for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. This is International Development Week, and I want to recognize all the development organizations that are doing great work around the world, seeking justice and fighting poverty. And it's topical that we look at this report, which includes some discussion of Canada's, I think, failure to do what was required to assist developing partners around the world when it comes to getting vaccines to people. I had always thought that the intention was to overbuy and to distribute vaccines to other countries to help make up shortfall. Throughout the course of the pandemic, there were very low vaccination rates in certain countries, and yet we are, we are destroying massive amounts of vaccines that could be given to countries that are struggling, and some of those donations that happened were with very little shelf life left on the vaccines, virtually unusable. Madam Auditor General, I wonder if you can just share your thoughts on specifically on the question of vaccine donation and what you found in terms of why the government has thrown vaccines in the garbage that could have been given to other countries.
It was actually an area that was a little difficult for us to look at. Global Affairs Canada plays a role when donations are needed. The government explained to us the difficulty, how the market was saturated, and how long it took at times to agree with foreign countries about how many doses would be sent and when they would be sent. So I'm sure the government would probably be able to provide you with more information, but that's the extent of where we stopped during our audit.
In terms of what was difficult, I don't think we have any officials here from Global Affairs Canada. Are you implying that they weren't forthcoming with information that you needed? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but was that the difficulty or something else?
No, I'm sorry, not at all. Please don't read that into my comments. They just said that it was a difficult process because of the fact that there were so many other countries trying to donate at the same time.
Right, but I guess in a context where many African countries have relatively extremely low vaccination rates, and I wonder if one contributing factor was the fact that we were telling Canadians not to opt for AstraZeneca while we were trying to give away AstraZeneca. Do one of the officials from the health department want to weigh in on this point?
Mr. Chair, what I would say just at the outset is Canada is one of the top donors to COVAX financially. Commitments.
That's not what I'm talking about. No, I'm talking about wasted doses that could have been donated.
Mr. Chair, I think it's an important point.
That was not my question.
The contribution to supporting vaccine access in low and middle income countries was through financial donations, not only
Sorry, sir, I do have limited time. Can you answer my question?
Dr. Lucas, the member has asked a question, and you might have an interesting point, but either move on or the member can interrupt you. But back to you.
The additional point is, in addition to offering vaccines, we offered financial support to countries.
We'll just stop with you, Mr. Lucas, because you're not answering the question. I mean, we're not getting an answer about the core issue here, which is large volumes of vaccine doses that were thrown in the garbage when there are a substantial number of countries around the world that have vaccination rates of less than 15%. Ms. Hogan, I did want to just briefly ask you about another subject. We've had two committees adopt motions that have asked your office to look into the government's dealings with McKinsey. I wonder if you can just give us a sense of how you would respond to those kinds of recommendations and what the timelines would be on a possible look into that important issue.
So as you know, we receive many requests from many committees and from the House. We are in the process of doing the ArriveCan audit, which was requested of us. We recognize that this committee had passed a unanimous motion for us to look at contracting with McKinsey. We're going back to, as an executive team, looking at and figuring out the best way to audit if it's something we can slot in, and we will respond to the committee very soon.
Thank you. Then there may be a concurrence of that happening in the House shortly. I'm almost out of time, but Ms. Reza, I wanted to just follow up and ask if you could submit the committee in writing information about what we're obligated to buy, how many doses, and how much money. Could you just provide that to the committee?
Certainly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Yip, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please. Over to you.
Thank you. And I'd like to return back to the topic of today, vaccines. Dr. Lucas, you tried to tell us earlier about the financial contribution Canada made to COVAX. Would you like to elaborate on that since you were cut off?
Thank you, Mr. President. The point I was making is that Canada worked in multiple regards to support access to vaccines and their distribution and use in low and middle income countries. First, through being a leading top donor to COVAX right from the very beginning in 2020. Additionally, providing funds through COVAX and bilaterally with countries to support their vaccine programs, information, distribution, and uptake in clinics. And then thirdly, as we've been discussing, providing doses through to COVAX and bilaterally with countries. And it's those elements that have supported and helped low and middle income countries. The investments to support information and support trusted people in communities on vaccine uptake that we have made through global affairs have been important. Recognizing some of the challenges on uptake in those countries has been noted.
Pardon me. Ms. Ship, you're on mute.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened. Okay, I'd like to ask Dr. Lucas another question on the COVID-19 vaccination coverage surveillance system. A review of the data showed that some population characteristics, such as ethnicity or indigenous status, were not included. I think that this is really important to have this type of disaggregated data, as information would help target programs or communications to groups that may be at higher risk. Can you provide an update on this?
I'll initially respond and then turn to Stephen Bent from the Public Health Agency. As I noted, the government is very focused on working with provinces and territories and other partners on significantly improving the sharing of health data across the country. As I noted, that'll be discussed with the Prime Minister and Premiers tomorrow. Extensive work has been done to address a number of the barriers, as I'd noted in a previous discussion. This includes, as we've been working with provinces and territories to obtain disaggregated data, which are specific to your question. I'll turn to Stephen Bend in terms of the surveillance system.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. In terms of our collaboration with the provinces and territories, we've been working since early 2022 to look at the CAFIS system and to look at Vaccine Connect as it evolves into the new version of that system to ensure that we have all of the relevant fields incorporated. Another aspect of this, obviously, is working with provinces and territories and local vaccine administrators to ensure that they actually submit the data that is required to be able to have that disaggregated information, as you've noted. So we're working very hard at it. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a question for Ms. Reza. In terms of moving forward, which, if any, lessons have been learned, have you been able to incorporate in terms of procuring vaccines for variants?
Thank you very much for the question. In general, what we strive for is to get early access, early delivery, and we also strive to get the access to the latest and greatest in terms of formulations that have been approved by Health Canada. In terms of some of the contracting best practices that we've brought in, I'm going to turn to my colleague, Mr. Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of procurement best practices, some of them were mentioned in the actual report in terms of looking at the integrity of companies, doing financial checks, but also what is important for us is to focus on determining your requirements and your needs. One of the things that we did early on in this, in terms of setting our strategy, was developing a playbook for the acquisition of vaccines. And going forward, we will continue to work with the Public Health Agency and Health Canada to ensure that we understand the needs and the timeliness, and that we have the requirements for the Canadians need well defined up front, and that as we're conducting our procurements, that we'll continue to look at how we ensure that we have integral partners, that our contracts reflect the needs of Canadians and give us the flexibility to manage those supplies as we go forward.
And Ms. Yip, I'm sorry, that is the time. I'm going to get in one more round, but because of the clock, I'm going to limit the government official opposition to 3 minutes each, et puis les deux autres parties à 90 secondes.
And the two other parties, 90 seconds.
In the NDP. Although, Mr. Cram, you have the floor for 3 minutes, please, and I'll be very tight with the time. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again to all the witnesses for being here today. This has been a very interesting meeting. I would like to just wrap up as many loose ends as I can in the time I have left. So if I look at the advanced purchase agreements listed on page 6 and the ones that were actually approved on page 9, would it be correct to conclude that all of the companies delivered a vaccine except Sanofi? Is that correct?
All of the 6 vaccines except Sanofi were approved. All except Medicago delivered doses.
Okay. So what went wrong with Sanofi and Medicago?
Sanofi has not completed their package of information and has modified their vaccine strategy through its work. Medicago had challenges on the manufacturing of their vaccine and did not enable us to approve its quality and therefore delivery for Canadians.
So I wonder if maybe I could just request a written submission on page 15, exhibit 9.3. It gives a nice breakdown of what happened to all the vaccines. Could we get a similar breakdown by advanced purchase agreement or by company, so we can see which advanced purchase agreements bore more fruit than others, so to speak?
Certainly, I think that we can do that as part of the follow-up that's been asked.
Okay, thank you. And so one question that I've had brought to my attention a number of times, was there any difference with these vaccines with respect to protection from liability compared to any other vaccine or medication on the market?
As part of the APA, we did negotiate different clauses of liability. They were done in consultation with public health. In terms of comparing it with other types of vaccines, I'm afraid I can't answer that question.
Oh, okay. Also on page 13, it says that the agency contracted logistics providers FedEx, Express Canada, and Innomar Strategies, Inc. for vaccine delivery and storage. Why not go with Canada Post?
Thank you for the question. We competed that, and we gave an open competition, and I think we received several bidders, and they were the ones with the best value bid.
10 seconds.
10 seconds, okay. I don't think I have time to get it off my chest.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Turning to Mr. Bradford, you have the floor for 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think all of us agree that none of us like wastage, especially of valuable vaccines, but I think it's far better that we err on the side of purchasing too many than not having enough. So it's the unnecessary wastage that we want to look at, because I believe Dr. Kocher indicated with any vaccination program, there was always, because of the process, wastage of vaccines. So we've heard from procurement services what they would do different and lessons learned. All of these report processes, that's always the most important thing. What have we learned going forward? So I'd be interested in hearing from both Dr. Lucas and Dr. Kocher what your departments have learned from this process and how you'd handle things differently going forward to avoid some of the pitfalls we experienced.
Mr. Chair, I'll highlight 2 points. One in regard to the regulatory efficiency we put in place and the dedicated teams that allowed for the expedited approval while maintaining safety standards. We have put forward for consultation now an agile regulation package, which takes the best of the learnings from that experience and proposes to adopt those in our food and drug regulations. The second point, as we've discussed, is securing the commitment to collect, share, and use with the appropriate privacy protections health data to support the needs of Canadians, both in public health emergencies and in the healthcare system, and we are resolute on advancing on that point.
Okay, great.
Sure, I'll add that just in terms of our own management of the supply, we are very committed to do work with PTs on the forward supply, planning informed by science and expert advice. We are also looking to, as our colleagues from PSPC said, adjust what are the delivery schedules, and also collaborate with Gavi and COVAX for any donations which we can make, and again. Also encourage the boosters when the NACI recommends or when the advisory committee recommends. We also believe that a couple of other things like domestic capacity to produce these vaccines, making sure that we have an involvement of all the PT and I, provincial, territorial, and Indigenous partners, just to make sure that we have the right kind of formulation which we can apply, which we can provide to the Canadian population. So those are the things which we've learned over time, and we will try to introduce into our planning further.
And you two have 10 seconds for a comment, really. Thank you. I'm trying to keep us on the clock. And turning to M. Perron, vous avez la parole pour 90 secondes seulement.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. Mrs. Hogan, if we start up where we were last question, could we have access to these secret contracts, whether it be in a in-camera subcommittee? I would like for you to explore this with your lawyers. As you stated, I would like the committee to have a response to see if this is even possible. And then I would like to come back on computer issues, on IT issues, to PHAC perhaps. A private firm was hired to solve this digital issue that seems to date for about 20 years. I mean, I don't want to be sensationalist, but it's a little bit surprising. And so here's my question. Are we sure that this problem will be resolved? Because it's important. And was there consultation with other private companies during the pandemic? McKinsey has been talked about. Are there other people or other companies that were subcontracted to? without using the expertise of our civil servants.
Santé publique, oui. Mr. Chair, I'll start and then pass to Luke. One of the
You have
things,
about 30 seconds. Okay.
one of the things is that specifically Deloitte was contracted for Vaccine Connect and not in general for the health data components, which are a part of our strategy in the Pan-Canadian Health Data Strategy. But Luke, if you can elaborate a little further on that.
Et brièvement, s'il vous plaît.
And briefly, thank you for the question. So yes, Deloitte was responsible for developing the platform, product management. This was done in conjunction with all the in-house expertise that we have. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor for 90 seconds, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd now like to turn back to my original question in relation to Exhibit 9.3 about how most unused doses in Canada will expire by the end of 2022. There were 21.7 million doses offered by Canada that were awaiting for donation. The AG in that questioning did offer that by December that only 1 million of those doses were successfully donated and that 8 million expired. Can Dr. Kochar confirm that the Public Health Agency of Canada was able to successfully donate the remainder, or were they all expired?
If I may, Mr. Chair, it was the opposite.
Oh,
8 million were donated and 1 million expired by early December.
And so of the 1 million then, what happened to that 1 million?
So perhaps I'll take the question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, overall, in terms of our vaccine wastage, by the end of the calendar year, we had 12 million doses of vaccine in federal inventory that have expired. Some of those would have included the residual in terms of the donation. I would offer, though, it's fundamentally important to note, I think, that these doses were put on offer, and there were countries that were not interested in taking them. So it's not the fact that they were not accessible to the countries, it was the fact that COVAX could not find suitable homes for them. And that is a difference from the early part of the pandemic where there was a lot of demand and there's scarcity of supply.
Is part of the contributing problem to that the requirement of these companies to have minimum amounts? Like we heard from procurement, 20 million.
So we've moved.
I heard the no. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm sorry. I have to keep things tight, and I apologize, but we did get an answer. Mr. McCall, you have the floor for 3 minutes, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And listening to all of this today, it seems very much an issue, despite what's apparently looks like being spun, is that we had far too few vaccines at the beginning, and now we have far too many at the end. I want to get an idea, please, I guess, from PSBC. Going forward, what have we signed for obligations for purchasing more vaccine, dollar value and shots, and who is providing the demand to you, the numbers that we are expecting to purchase? Is that coming from health? Where is that coming from? And then also the existing contracts we have, for example, Pfizer, are we obligated to buy from the original AP, or is it being revised as we have the booster shots come up?
Thank you very much for the question. As it relates to our current negotiation stance, we work very closely with the Public Health Agency and behind them, the provinces and territories, to predict demand and the need for supply. We renegotiate constantly our existing agreements, whether or not to trigger options, whether or not to adjust downward based on volume. So these are constantly moving parts. They're not static, which is why it will be helpful for me to come back with the various data points, but they're constantly being readjusted, and whether or not options are being triggered is a consideration that's done at the request of the Public Health Agency.
Okay. All of these negotiations is the government still claiming national security for the reason not to release vaccine pricing to Canadians?
Vaccine pricing is one of the commercially sensitive data elements in our contracts, and under our contractual obligations with the suppliers, we do not release that information.
But it's been released in other countries. So the Americans, Europeans release their pricing, but for some reason Canada will not because we're special? Like, why is that? And is this coming from the manufacturers or is this coming from the government?
I cannot comment in detail on what other countries do. I can advise, of course, that in some of the countries that you noted, in some of those markets, they are the countries that are producing the vaccines, and through their initial investments, they have perhaps a different pricing regime than we see in straight APAs with other countries. And this is in terms of guarding that commercially sensitive information that is done with discussions and with the vaccine suppliers.
You've got 13 seconds for a question and answer, Mr. McCauley.
I would just say thank you, AG Hogan, for your report and other from the office.
Thank you. Mr. Fragaskatos, you have the floor for 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to follow up on a point that I raised when I was asking questions earlier. It goes to Deputy Minister Lucas. In fact, in 2022, Johns Hopkins University put out a study on Canada and the United States, looking at rates of death through the COVID experience on a per capita basis. I'm quoting from the report printed in BBC here. 279 residents have died of COVID-19 per 100,000 people, compared to about 94 in Canada. So this saves you, if you wish, sir, you don't have to come back to the committee now with that data. But could you make a quick comment on, I wish we had longer, but the extent to which Canada's vaccine strategy, the approach taken here, may have contributed to that outcome?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Certainly, I think the broad engagement across the country with provinces and territories, communities, faith leaders, sports heroes, everyone joined in Canada to push the primary series vaccination, reaching leading levels in the G7 and the world. And I think that contributed significantly to that increase, as well as other public health measures in Canada created that differential between Canada and the United States.
Chair, if colleagues have another question,
you got 90 seconds. Yeah.
Well, okay.
Well, you can stop any time, but
I also see it's 1 o'clock, and
well, I try to finish the rounds, and no one's pressing to end, so you've still got 90 seconds.
No, that's fine. I'm glad to keep the time if that's what we're going to do. Back to this whole issue of international development, since it is International Development Week, again to Deputy Minister Lucas, the 37 bilateral agreements that have been signed between the government and the various countries. How does that come about exactly? How do we, form those deals, or which countries are chosen? How does that process unfold exactly, or whoever wishes to take it?
I'll start and then turn to my public health colleagues. Through global affairs, there's been very significant and sustained engagement throughout the pandemic, and certainly in the context of donating with COVAX, but as well based on our bilateral engagement priorities, including, for example, in the Americas and the Caribbean. We reached out to those countries and others. So I'll turn to colleagues on the specific.
About 20 seconds, just so you know, 20 seconds.
For all, Mr. Chair, bilateral, agreement. We actually reached out to multiple countries and offered those surplus vaccines, and there were situations where, in addition to Latin America and Caribbean countries, there were African countries who also opted for that, and we were diligent enough to not only send them the vaccines, but also the supplies which were needed for the vaccination also.
And thank you very much. I want to thank all our witnesses. I appreciate your indulgence with going over a few minutes of Mr. Fragaskatos. I can only imagine the reaction if I was to cut off the government member at the end. So I think better safe and to run it long to make sure I'd have you both. I'd have Mr. Fragaskatos and Mr. McCauley down at me. Instead, we like to hear from everyone, including our witnesses, and thank you again for appearing. And I will suspend the meeting. Thank you, or adjourn the meeting.